Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks, sponsored by University of Iowa Healthcare.
Welcome back to Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell here with a special 24, 30-hour later reaction edition to news that I think everybody's been waiting for. Out of West Michigan, Hayden Large is back in 2024. The pride of Hudsonville, great fullback. Oh, and Tim Lester, who used to coach the football team in Kalamazoo. He's also the new offensive coordinator, according to reports. So we're going to react to that. It was really cool. So you got to talk to Hayden real quick. I got to.
Yeah. So essentially, I just had a very short conversation with we haven't heard yet. Are you coming back for sure next year? And he was like, "Yep, I'm gonna be there." All right, cool.
Most low key, that works. We knew he had 2 years, but there we go.
Talk to him, Matt.
The app formerly known as Twitter.
Oh, got it.
The application that we call
online. Yeah, so awesome to hear about Hayden, but of course we're here to talk about Tim, and a guy who, let's face it, 2 weeks ago, a lot of Iowa fans probably did not know existed, along with Kevin Johns and many other names that might have been out here. Thanks to Andy Pepper from our sister station, WWMT, not the WMT that's right next door, WWMT, Channel 3 in Kalamazoo. Andy's a great guy. He's been covering the Broncos in a lot of different facets for a long, long time. Helping us get some video of Tim Lester's time there with just the second ever bowl win, the Quick Lane Bowl win, I believe, from 2021 there. Just, again, the second ever bowl win for Western Michigan football. If you aren't seeing this and you're listening to the audio side, of course, Iowa's News Now YouTube channel, you can see everything that we're going to be showing here. We're going to look at one of Coach Lester's Coach Tube pages, like a big walkthrough of RPOs and his philosophies and his approaches to coaching. That we'll take a look at that in a little bit. But let's start with your initial reactions, guys. Mike, ironically enough, you were in the 616. You were in West Michigan as this news was breaking. Oh, wow. But what were your first reactions hearing this name and the week kind of build-up of Kevin Johns is getting breakfast with Kirk in Iowa City, and then Tim Lester's name comes up? What's your initial reaction having 24 hours or so to digest the hire?
Yeah, so I think we all started seeing Tim Lester's name and Kevin Johns around the same time on Twitter. I think insiders were posting it on social medias, in the boards and whatnot. And I'm not going to be honest, I initially, after briefly looking into their backgrounds, I preferred Johns just because he has that more Power 5 history than Lester. But after doing a deep dive and kind of looking at what kind of offense he run, I don't hate the hire, and I'm willing to, let's see how it goes. I think the one interesting aspect is after we found, and we have a text group, and we were looking at this Coach Tube page that was shown a little bit of him going over his RPO offense. Like, will Iowa implement that, or will Kirk kind of say, okay, here's our offense, and this is how you should run it? And that will be an interesting thing that we can see in spring practice, and then moving forward into next year, because I really like the idea of moving the offense to a simpler, all right, let's read that person goes here, the ball goes there. Or if this person comes up or stays back, we're just going to run down their throat. They have enough running backs to put a different, to build a lot of cool stuff. So I just am interested to see what kind of approach they take and if Kirk has really given him the reins.
I would be curious to hear if you guys think that, based on what you saw out of that, do you think that Cade McNamara is a good fit for that style? I mean, when Cade came here, obviously he was under a different offensive coordinator. Do you think that Cade fits that style well?
For all the videos that I've seen, it's less of the quarterback runs. It's more of a hand the ball off or throw it. Yeah. So in that instance, I think he could probably, he's smart enough to run it. I don't want to get people confused with, if you have a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen in RPO, could be this guy runs it, I could run it or throw it. It seemed more to me and he incorporated tight ends more of the brief amount of videos that I've seen, which,
I was told by a good source in Kalamazoo that Tim Lester, quote, loves a pass-catching tight end. Mm-hmm. Tim, I got good news for you, bud. You are at a university that prides itself on that.
I personally don't have a lot of opinion, I guess, on the matter. It seems like Hawkeye fans, I guess I don't know if Hawkeye fans were split on the matter or if there was more excitement, more like annoyance at the hire. It seems like there was a lot of people that didn't love the hire, I guess, but I mean, it seems like that was going to be the reaction to literally any hire out there. There was going to be some sort of blowback. Well, look at this season that they had in the past, and they were going to say that this wasn't the right hire. So no matter what, I feel like there was going to be some split in the fan base about what they did or didn't like about a person. The only thing I think I was a little surprised about is that Tim Lester does not have a lot of offensive coordinator experience. He had 2 years at Syracuse where he was the OC. Outside of that, a good chunk of head coaching experience at the MAC level. QB coach, things like that, but not a lot of OC work.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Mitch, but he was calling plays for a majority of his head coaching, right?
So I also talked to somebody in Kalamazoo about this. He took over play calling in 2018 when we start to see that ascension. It's been his offense through that whole time. Going into 2019, 20, 21, and 22. In 22, there was a new offensive coordinator as well. Play calling duties were kind of dispersed, whether it was one guy or two guys splitting it. It was always his offense, but I think he was the lone play caller only in 2018. But it's always been his offense in the RPO. To your point, yeah, to whether or not Cade would fit in that, or a guy like Marco who can move around quite a bit. He coached against Cade, Michigan, that 2021 season. They opened against Western Michigan. I think Cade threw like 11 passes. So I don't know how much of a look he got at Cade. I do think, though, it's very comparable to what, if you want a Big Ten familiarity, what Minnesota ran when Kirk Ferentz was the OC there in 2019 when they went 11-2 and put up a bunch of points, where Tanner Morgan, and they would almost joke about this, Tanner Morgan wasn't a fleet of foot guy. He could move a little bit and could, scramble if he needed to, but those RPOs were basically directed to, let's hand it off to our, they were in the same boat, have a lot of stable running back position, and then you have two NFL wide receivers to throw to and a little bit of the tight end as well. So I think it would be like that. So I think for a year, Cade could absolutely function out of that and utilize everything around there. The fact that he doesn't have a lot of offensive coordinator specific experience and hasn't had it for about a decade, I'm more encouraged by the fact that he was running his own program for 6 years. As far as I could find, Kirk's made 2 hires in his tenure of guys who have Division I head coaching experience. First one was Ken O'Keefe, who was the head coach at Fordham for a year before he came in as the initial OC. He had a great run at Allegheny College, which is a D3 school, won a national title. Ken O'Keefe was a great, great head coach for the time that he was a head coach. And then Greg Davis was the head coach at Tulane, like 20 years before he got to Iowa City. And I think you combine their Division I head coaching experience, and I think it's like 4 years there, and Lester brings in 6. So I know he doesn't have offensive coordinator experience, but the only reason he doesn't have offensive coordinator experience is because you're a head coach at the Division I level, whether or not it's the MAC, Group of 5, whatever. He's run his own program. And I'm very interested to see what that means for the autonomy of what he gets to do with the offense, whether it is Kirk saying, hey, like, this is the offense we're going to run, or I wonder if that's part of the appeal, too, of just, hey, like, we've got guys that can catch passes, tight ends that can catch passes. Part of the appeal maybe like, hey, I'm coming in, I've run my own ship, just let me do the offense, let me get this RPO stuff in there, and let's see what we can do. And I think, because I think a lot of people for a long, long time now have wanted some semblance of RPO option, mobile quarterback, any sort of that stuff. I think that's a big reason why, aside from the fact that the offense wasn't really doing a whole lot of anything against Tennessee, when Marco comes in and starts scrambling and picking up yardage, so many people were thrilled about he was, I think, the leading rusher or close to it for that game. But it was just because there was mobility at the quarterback position, and being able to install the RPO would do a lot of that. So I do wonder if, given how much experience, and as you see here if you're watching on the YouTube channel, the numbers there and the success that he had 4 straight seasons, 2018 through 21, until the bottom drops out in 22 when he loses Sky Moore to the NFL. Caleb Ellaby, who was a great RPO quarterback for him, another guy who could run a little bit but would sit back and cut up the defense through the air as well. 4 straight years where they were in the top 40 in both total offense and total points per game, including that COVID-shortened year in 2020. They had the 10th ranked scoring offense in the country. So I don't understand the fans that are just like, who is this guy? Like, why is he coming in? Like, look at and I put those out there the day before, like the names, or it was kind of being formally reported. And that started catching on then yesterday as the news got out, and people were like, oh, well, like, here are the numbers. I'm like, so you're mad about a guy that you didn't even know his background because an article maybe got shared that said you should riot if he's hired over Kevin Johns.
I guess it seems like no matter what, for the people that like the hire and for people that don't like the hire, you can cherry pick some numbers out of his resume and say this is a bad hire or this is a good hire.
Exactly.
2022 was rough.
Not a great year.
And his years at Syracuse were rough too.
Sorry, say that again, Mike.
His years at Syracuse were rough too, but he was in 2014. He was thrown in after the offense coordinator got fired after like the 6th game. He was the last 7 games, and then
And they jumped up a lot in the next season.
they did. Yeah, they
I
did
will
jump.
also say let's go back to January 2014. What were you doing? What was your job?
January 2014, I was in Cambodia. I was on the mission field in 2013 and 14, so I was
humble brag.
ringing in the new year in a
Just
village in
helping
Cambodia.
people and being wonderful. Mike, what were you doing?
I'm just an angel that fell to earth. No big deal.
That is a good point. Also, he was 14 years into his coaching career though, because he started in 20.
yeah.
I was only 2 years into my producing career at KIMT in Mason City.
Mason City, yeah.
So
Helping people.
I was a weekend
I-
sports anchor in Grand Rapids. Yeah.
if you're an offense coordinator at Syracuse, before that he was the quarterbacks coach, and I believe maybe the
He'd been at like D3 level. and
coordinator?
I think he was a high school.
like that's
coordinator.
nothing to sneeze about. Like
Experience is experience.
Yeah, it's
but,
experience.
You know, I was talking to somebody about this not too long ago. There's a certain point where you stop putting your GPA on your resume because it's not really a great measure of of what you are.
Especially if
to
you're in
your
our
business.
field.
So especially in, again, why wasn't he an OC? Well, because he's been a head coach of a program for 6 years too. So it's all that stuff.
To that point, though, and I don't want to be totally we're all in because on the bandwagon because I'm just looking at this as trying to be as It really, and Kirk Ferentz said, I can't remember exactly when, but sometime in the last few months that he judges offensive coordinators on wins and losses.
Yeah.
And the Syracuse, I know that first year he was 1-6, and then the second one wasn't very good either. But then those years where they had the good offense, their defense wasn't that good, and I think he had a 500 career record, like 37-32 was his record in the MAC.
I will say this about Western Michigan, having covered that program and being there firsthand and watching the most successful year ever in Kalamazoo at 13-1, winning their first MAC title in 2016 since 1988, and 13 wins in a season is, I don't know if they had a double-digit win season before that. Like, it is immensely. Nobody wins in Kalamazoo. They've got good teams, and they have stars. They've certainly, Greg Jennings and all those players. Matt LaFleur, as we were talking, was a Western Michigan Bronco, and guys have had success there. I don't know Matt's playing resume, but it's tough to win there. And the fact that he won 37 games in 6 years is probably decent, and the fact that he has one of the 2 ever bowl wins there also speaks a little more. But yeah, the wins and losses people looked at that and started bringing it up, and like, if you're not Toledo or Northern Illinois, like, you're tough pressed to find some.
We should mention too, he got fired in his last year, and they brought in a new athletic director. What I could tell from articles, and it seems like they were frustrated after those 4 years after Fleck that they couldn't get back to the MAC championship game, and it seemed like they wanted more. And it was 10 months after they even signed an extension. That's kind of a wild thing, but it looked like they had a new idea.
I was reading that article from MLive, and Lester even shared it online, which was like, hey, like, I can't remember the reporter's name, unfortunately, but said something like, hey, always been firm and fair with me, like, I appreciate this. And he had kind of just talked like, felt pretty good about where we were and that we were going to get another shot. Kathy Beauregard is who brought him in. She's the one who brought in PJ back in December of 2012 or January 13, whenever it was. And he felt good that even with the AD transition that he was going to get another shot. They won their last 2 games in 22. And then it sounded like, maybe not total blindside, but then was called in and told, hey, we're going to go another direction. That's how Lance Taylor ends up at Western.
You know who their most famous alumni is at Western Michigan?
John Saunders was a wonderful...
Terry Crews.
Terry Crews also played at Western Michigan.
Also a football alumni.
I go John Saunders.
Fair
but
enough.
yeah.
I am curious to ask you guys, like, as Hawkeye fans, over the last 3 months since we knew that Brian Ferentz was not going to be back, of all the names that have been thrown out there, who do you think would have been who would have been the hire that you guys would have wanted the most out of all the names that have kind of been bandied about over the last few months?
I think it was probably Paul Chryst, just because I think he has a track record of excelling offensive football the way Iowa plays.
Yeah.
At Wisconsin. He had a good record there as offensive coordinator and as coach before he got fired that last year. And
his nephew's on staff, and again, the familiarity of just the Big Ten. I think Chryst was always kind of put up there.
I don't disagree. I think that back in December when we had David Eicholt on the show to talk about the OC search, he'd said that Paul Chryst seemed like the most likely candidate when they were leading up to the bowl game, and there were rumors about whether or not he might have even gotten offered the position or not. Don't know that for sure. The thing I do like about hiring a guy like Tim Lester, who is a little bit more of a relative unknown, is that a guy like Chryst, a guy even maybe like Joe Philbin would come in, and they're a little bit older, been around the block a little bit longer, and maybe a little more set in their ways. I feel like Tim Lester maybe has something to prove. He's a guy who comes in and is like, he really wants to show that he can make it at the Power 5 level as an offensive coordinator, maybe turn things around at a program like Iowa that's had a bad offense the last few years. So he's going to come in with maybe a little bit more motivations than some other coaches would, coming in here and wanting to show that he can lead a program like this to maybe a CFP playoff appearance if they even get up to whatever, top 50 in the country, something like that. So not to say I don't really have an opinion about what was or wasn't the right hire, but that is, I think, the benefit of hiring somebody who is more of a relative unknown, somebody that people don't know a lot about.
I will say, and I'm certainly not saying Tim Lester is the same person as Paul Chryst or has the resume that Paul Chryst does, but you do in a little bit comparability get a guy with head coaching experience at the Division I level who has an offense that's been productive. It's not Paul Chryst light or anything like that, but you're getting some of the traits that you would have got with Chryst, who I think if you ask a lot of fans going back to the end of October, getting into November, like who's your dream candidate that seems to fit? I think a lot of them would have said Paul Chryst if they had their pick of anybody who was kind of on the radar already.
It was realistic.
Who was realistic.
Kalen DeBoer was never going to come be the offense coordinator at Iowa.
Ryan Grubb wasn't going to, stuff like that.
That's what I meant, not the coach, but Ryan Grubb.
I think Lester checks some of those boxes. And again, the fact that he is a guy who has a ton of 6 years worth of Division I head coaching experience, which is more head coaching experience than any other coordinators had combined at Iowa. The big question for me is, does that signal that Kirk's like, hey, you know how to steer the ship, it's your offense, go get it. We'll see. I don't know, but I do think that's an interesting wrinkle that we haven't seen again since Greg Davis came in, and he was 20 years removed from his head coaching experience. Here's a guy who's a year and a half removed from it and has spent a lot of time in now an NFL shop here in the last year in Green Bay.
What did you guys think of the Kevin Johns stuff? I know he was in town and he interviewed with Kirk.
I think he would have been good.
Yeah? That's who I would have preferred, but I'm not going to be – I'm not one of the ones that – I don't have season tickets, but I'm not going to be like, I'm never going to go to an Iowa game again, kind of deal.
The vitriol, again, you go back 2 weeks ago, caucus night in America, the casual Iowa fan did not know those two names and knew nothing about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think, and this is maybe getting like technologically, some technical psychology, of seeing a picture of a guy in Iowa City with Kirk having breakfast. I think that immediately, like, well, he's here, like, okay, and then you look at his resume and people go, this is a really good resume, like he's had success. This guy brought us Dan Persa. We got to get him over here now because he was the pass game coordinator for Northwestern back in those days. I think just seeing him in Iowa City and then seeing the resume and be like, okay, yeah, like this is good. That was that excitement. And then, I think the first time Tim Lester's name was publicly put out there on social media was connected to that Syracuse article, and it said like, boy, Iowa fans are going to be happy if Tim Lester gets hired over Kevin Johns. And if you hadn't seen that name before and that's your first impression of Tim Lester's a guy I need to go into the streets and yell about, I think that maybe started to lay the foundation of how people were going to react to what. Because again, when those numbers got out there of what his offenses did at Western Michigan, people were like, oh, that doesn't sound so bad at all. Like, yeah, pretty good, especially when you have the 133rd ranked offense in the country.
This is a very uncredible source, and so
by all means.
So we're going to put it out there and see what you think. Just kind of funny thing is you brought up Kevin Johns. I was like, oh yeah, I was just going to go back and look at his resume again or his past. It's weird. On his Wikipedia page, his current team does say Iowa. A weird connection would be, and I don't know if this is even a possibility, but we're looking for a wide receivers coach right now. Kevin Johns has a lot of experience as a wide receivers coach at Richmond, at Northwestern, at Indiana, for 5 years at Indiana. At Texas Tech, he was a wide receivers coach as well as the OC. I don't know if there's a possibility there that Kevin Johns would be brought in as a wide receivers coach, or if that would be too much of a step down after being the OC at Duke.
It's an interesting wrinkle. I think there was,
That would be interesting.
through the noise, there were some people like, well, what if both of them come here?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That will be. I mean, I obviously don't. I didn't know much about Johns until this week. But then when you associate with, he's been the Duke's offensive coordinator the past few years, and Duke's been actually relevant in football with Riley Leonard, and their coach just went to Texas A&M and brought in Klein from Kansas State. I don't know if he has another. I mean, you got to figure he could be an offensive coordinator at a Group of 5 team. You know, who knows? It's late in the hiring process, but that would be, I think, a slam dunk assistant coach hire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if he was quarterback's coach and Johns is receivers coach. I mean, I'm sure he coaches offense. He could do both, but I feel like the offensive coordinator would have first pick on what position he wants to pick.
Yeah,
coach.
I'll be interested. And of course, Johns was also Lester's first offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach in Kalamazoo in 2017.
Is there an assumption, presumption that Lester, we keep saying Lester, I keep thinking of Jamie Vardy as we talk about Lester. I knew these soccer fans would appreciate that one. Is there a assumption that he's going to be the QB coach of this team as well? I mean, he's had obviously a lot.
He
of
is a
years as
quarterback,
QB
so
coach,
that's the only reason I think so. Is that, and
That's another thing I
again,
like
the track
about
record
the hire.
of Blau at Purdue and what he did with Hiller at Western Michigan, and I don't know who he was coaching exactly at Syracuse, but I know when he was hired in Kalamazoo, people immediately pointed to, like, look what he did with Tim Hiller, because Tim Hiller, again, like, he built his own records, and then Tim Hiller he built up, and Tim Hiller built them, and those things stood until I think Zach Terrell now owns all of them.
I'd be surprised if he's not the QB coach, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's everybody's like assumption at this point.
I would think so.
We have one commenter saying that, and I haven't seen this, so I just want to throw it out there, that Johns wanted more money, and that's why it didn't happen. I haven't seen any solid reporting on that yet, but you never know. I don't know if we'll ever know the insiding of who got offered.
I will say this, because and how much stock you put in social media comments, I don't know, because again, people can just like get on a roll of parroting, whatever. I don't think Tim Lester was hired because he's a yes man. I've seen that out there quite a bit. Like Tim Lester, again, ran his own program for 6 years. He's his own boss, and I think, and maybe that's part of the appeal, is that Kirk's like, okay, here's a guy who's run his own program and can steer us in the right direction, maybe push us a little bit. Right. I don't know. You know, I don't know if it's new Kirk 4.0 or whatever version, whatever OS we're on for Kirk's, but
El Capitan.
you know, again, you know, he made that move in 2015 to changing the way they practice in the morning instead of the afternoon, and just this whole systemic reboot in a lot of ways. And I don't know if bottoming out here is, okay, well, let's get a guy in here who's run his own ship and let him steer us where he feels it's best. And we think we have personnel. I think, to your point, the fact that Iowa does have a lot of good running backs. Yeah, I mean, there's 5 dudes that have taken snaps, at least 5, 6 if you count Max White.
And 2 freshmen coming in.
Yeah, and you've got more great guys behind. I think the idea that you could have a system that utilizes more backs and tight ends, I mean, that's you can have a lot of success there. So, again, we're speculating it's January 29th. We're not going to – this still hasn't been formally announced by the school.
That's a good point.
And we really don't know yet. But so we've got this Coach Tube video up from Lester. I think it's like $15 you can buy. There's a couple free clips. So this is like
class that he teaches on his RPO offense.
Yeah, and you said this is from September 2022.
Yeah.
So this would have been from 21 against Central Michigan, Battle for the Victory Cannon. It's a fun game. And that's Caleb Ellaby, who is the quarterback here again. Caleb could run around. Caleb is a fun quarterback to watch in this offense as a guy who appreciates some action. But you'll see his entire breakdown on this video here, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, is never with Caleb having an option to run. It's either he's handing off to the running back, who I don't know if that's Ladarius Jefferson or who it might be there, either handing off or going to, number 1, I believe, is Sky Moore, who it's either Sky Moore or Dwayne Eskridge.
I think it's Sky Moore because he houses this.
It could be Dwayne Eskridge. Though,
okay.
If it's 21, it might be Eskridge, because Dwayne Eskridge was an incredible player in that offense too. But it's a short little curl, but there's never an option for Caleb to run. We're either going to hand it off or we're going to throw that. And then again, I'm pretty sure that's Dwayne Eskridge. I should have done my research there. But
Well, you look it up. The one thing I like about these kind of offenses is it just you always hear every year how difficult Iowa's offense is to learn, and it takes quarterbacks a couple years to learn the system.
that's Eskridge, yeah.
This is just you're usually, and there's more. I'm simplifying it now, but you're reading one person, and based off that one person, you make a decision. So like that just could make it so much simpler for your younger players to get it, so they could come in and perform.
I just, and I don't know if it's because we're a generation who grew up playing NCAA. And I think we're finally going to get a new one this year, where read options and stuff like that were so prevalent that this is, and then again in reality, seeing it have so much success, it's such a simple thing to install, and if you run it right, it is really tough to stop, and it utilizes so many different guys. And if you have a Dwayne Eskridge or a Sky Moore, or in Iowa's case, a speedy guy like, Seth, I mean, they've utilized him in using those sweeps and reverses, and he likes doing those. You get a guy who can just be in space and come off this read pass option and is given the ability to make some plays. It's enticing, it's exciting, and if Kirk makes the decision of, hey, like, Tim, this is your offense, go run it the way you want, I mean, there's opportunity, and you got more guys coming in too, of course, in the recruiting class.
Did anybody know what Coach 2 was before this morning? I'd never heard of this website until now.
Coach 2.
I did not, and I'll link this and I'll put this on the web after we're done with this, and you guys can go, and if you want to pay the $14.99 to watch the full stuff, I love this stuff. I don't matter who the coach is. If it's a coach, I feel like fans and us in general who cover the game from the sideline, we know like 1% of, maybe if that. It's just so intricate football, and there's so many different pieces that when one coach just goes and talks about their philosophy, it just has me fascinated.
I think I said this the last time that we were talking about the hires, maybe in early January after the bowl game when we were kind of doing a recap of the season. But I do really like, and I do think that there is a little bit of a change coming, as we talk about the updated version, as we go to Kirk Leopard, then I think there's maybe a somewhat of a change ahead. Not a drastic change as far as like a head coach, but just him allowing some change within his program. As much as he talks about not changing things, he's got an assistant head coach, which he's never had before, and I think that he, after seeing what the offense did not do over the last few years, I think is willing to maybe concede, like, I hand over a little bit more of the playbook responsibilities to somebody else, and that's what I think we might get out of Lester.
And even though your associate head coach is the linebackers coach, he was a wide receiver. He's got a little.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
At Co, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe this is the question we wrap up on. Again, it's January 29th. We're not going to see this offense for the first time until, I'm guessing, April 13th or 20th, whenever the spring scrimmage ends up being, one of those Saturdays.
And Cade's not going to be ready.
And Cade won't be ready, so it's going to be Deacon and Marco, I'm guessing, running the majority of stuff.
If Deacon comes out there and starts, oh man, Hawkeye Nation, get ready. Anyway.
It's a scrimmage. It's okay. What to you on January 29th would be, in your mind, a successful jump for this offense in terms of the rankings? Again, 133rd in the nation, last in total offense. I believe they were like 125th in points per game. What to you is a jump that shows some, that you would say, like, okay, like there's progress, and it wouldn't be considered a disappointment? I mean, there literally, in many cases, is nowhere to go but up. What to you is they have to get into the top what to be successful, or to feel like there's progress being made in 24?
That's the best part for Tim Lester. The bar is low. I mean, I would even say 85. If you get an 85 top, and the defense still, I expect the defense to still be good next year, if not great. If you have an 85th ranked offense, how many points is that per game? I don't have it up right now.
So here's my take. Get in the top 100.
Yeah.
The top 100 would mean, I believe, another 110 yards a game, which would get you to like 340. And it would be like nine and a half more points a game, which would take you from where they were to, I think, like basically averaging 24 a game. Not quite 25. We've talked enough about 25. But if you can tell me that you're in the top 100, which, again, like 99th, 98th doesn't sound great, but coming from where you are, and with, that's another long touchdown drive and a decent field goal drive. we've talked for a year now. Like, it doesn't take a lot, but if you can do that and show that market improvement,
It's insanity to me that I actually can't remember this right now. But what was the number they were? Was 24 or 25? That
25.
It was 25.
7
Okay.
wins, 25.
I think that kind of is at least the ideal number right now that like should be kind of the low hurdle to clear. If they scored 25 points a game this last year, that would have put them at 81st in the nation, right behind Wyoming and right ahead of Northern Illinois. And I think that would be a reasonable enough bar to clear where it's like, give us 2 to 3 touchdowns a game. We'll hit a field goal or 2. Maybe the defense will provide a touchdown here and there, but as long as you get us maybe 3 touchdowns a game out of this offense, then that's good enough for the rest of this team to take it from there.
It's not going to take a lot. You know, again, the numbers are what they are, but anybody who watched the game saw a lot of it was missed opportunities. You know, talk about the Lions last night against the 49ers and whether or not the fourth down calls or what, you know, cost the Lions the game or the execute. We hear so much about execution, and it's a drop pass here, a drop pass there, whatever it may be. Like, Iowa had opportunities to move the ball in some circumstances with offense last year, and just, you know, whether it's the offensive line continuing to grow or some drop passes, the attrition of the injuries, everything like that. Like, you talk about 100 yards, and yeah, it'd be 30% more productivity in terms of yards per game, or I think more than that. I'm probably doing the math wrong. Probably closer to 50. Like, it doesn't take a lot to make some big strides, and so that's why I'm like, if you get in the top 100, you've jumped up 30-plus spots, and you've significantly improved your offense to a point where, again, like everyone was talking about, if they just had a little bit of offense, that little bit could go a long way.
It's not just the 100 yards. 100 yards is a couple more first downs. Yeah. It's time of possession, and that's the complementary football Kirk always preaches about. Like, Iowa did not play complementary football this year. Their defense and special teams were hindered by the offense. If they can jump into that 190 and 80th, we're not asking for a lot. Like, that will drastically improve this team. But that's a big if the defense plays at that elite level, which at some point it's going to drop off. I don't know if it's this year. I expected it to happen this year because I was like, there's no way they repeat 2022. 2023 was great. So, I mean, you cannot expect them to keep playing that way at that level, you know? So the offense has to come closer to that defensive level just so the team stays the same, you know, or improves.
So 234 yards a game was their average this last year. If they went up 100 yards a game, that would put them right around this last year. That would have been 101st in the country.
Yeah, I think I saw 99th was like 110 yards more or something like that.
Yeah, yep. So,
yeah,
doable objectives if you're a new offensive coordinator coming into this team.
We'll see what everything looks like. Again, hasn't been announced. I'm sure. We were talking, I assume there will be a press conference just because it is a fairly significant hire. I would imagine it would come shortly after the announcement, but I don't know.
What would be the most Kirk Ferentz ever not have a press conference or flip and hire someone else after we talk about it?
Man, there was, again, like getting in the comments and seeing people react in just super level-headed, rational ways of just like, I bet he had already hired Tim Lester, and he just brought in Kevin Johns to like troll the fans. Like, yep, nope, you're totally right. That's exactly what happened.
Classic Kirk move.
The worst part about it is we'll never know.
I don't know if Kirk knows the meaning of the word troll in the internet era. Like, yeah, that was a wild theory. But listen, we don't know a whole lot yet. We know it's Tim Lester, it sounds like, and we'll go from there. They've got a few months to get everything in line and see what this offense does again coming into April. So we'll keep you up to date on everything. Hopefully talk to you soon once everything's announced and maybe get our first chance to talk to Tim ourselves. But you can follow Eye on the Hawks on Twitter at Eye on the Hawks, and of course the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel and Instagram. Plenty of clips there, all this stuff. Again, the visuals out there. You can get your look at Tim Lester's Coach Tube walkthrough there. We'll link to that and everything as well. But yeah, until we get official word that Tim Lester's coming to Iowa City, we'll leave it at that. For Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. We'll talk offense hopefully sometime soon here again on Eye on the Hawks.